Well, guys, the rumors are true. Greetings, my good bitches. The name's Francis. Coke Francis. I'm an editor, comedy writer, drag artist, and I'm here because it's the rumor, the legend, the mystery. Welcome to Coke Francis Season 2. I've got a whole new setup and a kinda new look. I do my eyeliner better now. My co-producer and I have some great stuff lined up for 2023, including this video, the next one. I'm vaxxed, waxed, and ready to spit facts. And, as always, unsolicited opinions. And since this is the beginning of a new season, I'm always looking for new topics to make videos on, so if you have a suggestion, if you have something that you would love to see me rant about, please leave it in the comment section below. My mental health journey has actually been going pretty smoothly, so I do read all the comments now. And since I'd like to kick off this new year and new season on a positive note, today we'll be talking, well, you'll be talking, I'll be gushing, about a movie that's been a huge part of my life for a quarter of a century. I know I'm not alone in this. If you're a single-digit age in the 1990s, you probably grew up watching Anastasia. And unless you're a single-digit IQ, you probably loved it too. I truly hate giving into nostalgia boners, but this movie is an exception for me. 25 years later, this movie still slaps, and I'm gonna talk about why. I'm also gonna talk about why most of Russia actually liked it and the Russian Orthodox Church hated it. In case you guys didn't know, I'm actually half Russian and half asleep, so my fanboy girling over this movie is always a roll of the dice when it comes to honoring my ancestors. And we will be, most importantly, simping for Dmitri. But before we begin, oh my god, I'm so excited to be saying that again right now. If you are a fan of watching a very tired drag queen talk about nerd shit forever, I ask that you please make a long cross-country trip to reunite a young woman with her grandmother. When you finally meet her, instead of introducing her to her granddaughter, kindly unzip your pants and dick slap those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. Now, there's another film from 1956 by the same name and with a similar story, starring the enigmatic Ingrid Bergman and this Jeff Bezos looking fellow. The Anastasia we'll be talking about today is actually heavily based off of this movie, but this time it's a musical that's way more fun and is famous for being one of the first animated princess films to give Disney a run for its dirty, dirty money. Actually, did you know that Disney heiress Abigail Disney is actively lobbying to get billionaires to pay higher taxes, including herself? I mean, you know I'm as eat the rich as they come, but in fact, Anastasia was the first film to be produced out of 20th Century Fox's animation division and is still one of its most popular and profitable movies to this day. It also received Oscar noms for Best Original Score in a Comedy or Musical and Best Original Song. Due to copyright bullshit, I'm not sure if I will be able to show you these songs, so I've linked the soundtrack in the description box below. The fact that it's not on Spotify is low-key a red flag, so I'm not gonna risk it. And to thank for one of the greatest princess stories of all time are Don Bluth and Gary Goldman, the masterminds behind many super mid animated films to follow, such as All Dogs Go to Heaven, Land Before Time, and An American Tail. I had actually completely forgotten about that last one until I was writing this script, and then I remembered, oh yeah, when I was a kid, there was a mouse named fucking Fievel. So for those of you who haven't seen this movie, even though you really fucking should. It's based off a what-if scenario of a rumor that had been circulating for decades after the brutal execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his family, which ended the Romanov dynasty and straight up abolished the monarchy in Russia. So, of course, since rumors spawn out of every celebrity mishap, there was widespread speculation that one of the Tsar's daughters, the Grand Duchess Anastasia, had actually survived since the location of her burial was unknown until 2007. This, of course, was not true, and the family went out in one of the worst ways imaginable. But plenty of women falsely claimed to be Anastasia for years to come. The what-if scenario in this movie is that not only did Anastasia survive, but she is living her best life. She discovers she's Russian royalty, she's reunited with her beloved grandmother, and then she gives all that up to elope with this hunk. It couldn't be further from the truth, but trust me, nobody would want to see what actually happened. Just look at what happened when Russia told the real story of Pinocchio.
Father, when can I leave to be on my own? I've got the whole world to see. Senorina!
But thank our Lord God Emperor Don Bluth, we were presented with a beautifully animated movie with relatable characters, a slappin' soundtrack, and a deliciously 90s cast, including Meg Ryan, John Cusack, Kelsey Grammer, Hank Azaria, Christopher Lloyd, Kirsten Dunst, Bernadette Peters, and motherfucking Angela Lansbury. And when it was released, the whole world was like,
Hold up! Hold up!
you mean to tell me that this movie, produced at the height of the Disney Renaissance, is not a Disney film? Well, it is now, because Disney swallowed up the artist formerly known as 20th Century Fox, and the discussion has begun as to whether or not Anastasia will be recognized as a canon Disney princess. While she's certainly deserving of that title, Mr. Bluth has stated himself that he respects Disney's decision to do so, as long as it refrains from, quote, marketing her as just another Disney princess. But the beauty of Anastasia is that she's not just another Disney princess, and we're gonna see why and how. So without further ado, let's get loud. So right off the bat, they show off the music box that I fucking have too, and we're given a nice introduction by the real GOAT, Madame Angela Lansbury, may she rest in peace. This movie does a really good job at making Russia seem lit. And here in the palace, we only meet like 3 of the Romanovs, but here they're the most important ones. Our titular heroine, played by a very small Kirsten Dunst, her grandmother Marie, played by Madame Lansbury, and her father, Tsar Nicholas II, who actually looks quite a bit like the real Tsar Nicholas. This is the first of the few actual historical accuracies we'll see in this film.
You belong in the kitchen.
It happens to men too. Everyone is having a grand old time, especially Anastasia and her grandmother. But that's all interrupted when their ex-holy advisor Rasputin shows up, played by Christopher Lloyd. He's still bitter after being exiled for treason, so he casts a curse on the whole family, as one does. As for the real Rasputin, his increasing unpopularity as a mystical man started to make the royal family look like total kooks, so he was later assassinated by Russian noblemen who disagreed with that. Here, he's accompanied by a bat named Bartok, played by Hank Azaria, doing an, I think, non-offensive voice. The biggest historical accuracy here, though, that big old beard. Rasputin is so hell-bent on revenge that he sells his soul for an unholy reliquary, and homie here summons literal demons to light the entire palace on fire, essentially sparking the Russian Revolution. This movie is rated G. Why? It effectively kills almost everyone inside except for Anastasia and her grandmother, who are led through a secret door in the wall by that nice young kitchen boy.
Why don't you have a seat right over there?
And as they make their way to the train to escape, they tragically become separated to the tune of the Russian opera's haunting chorus, and Anastasia falls and hits her head so hard that she develops amnesia. Anastasia gets amnesia. Anesthesia! Cut to 10 years later, and we're introduced to post-revolution St. Petersburg, which, again, this movie makes look super lit. We also hear the first bangin' song of many more to come, and we're introduced to these two Chads. Vlad, played by Kelsey Grammer, and Dmitri, my first cartoon crush, played by John Cusack. Tragically, we only get to hear Kelsey Grammer sing 1.5 times in this movie. So here is where they hear the age age-old rumor that Anastasia was the sole survivor of the Romanov family. And as professional con men, this is the golden opportunity for them to find a girl who can play the part of the Grand Duchess, schlep her ass all the way to Paris, reunite her with her grandmother, and receive a reward that only a dowager empress could offer. What's the worst that could happen after all? Meanwhile, our girl Anastasia, played by Jack Quaid's mom, has been locked up in an orphanage for the past decade and has been going by the name Anya due to her anesthesia. But now she's getting kicked out upon turning 18. Just so you know, might as well put this out here now. I'm not going to stop making the anesthesia joke. You can always tell when someone is a main character in this movie because their face moves like a normal person's and not a completely over-the-top cartoon like this orphanage lady. Kind of like how in anime games, the main characters will always wear like some kind of accessory over their school uniforms to separate them from everyone else. But this is Miss Thing's one scene in the whole damn movie. And this scene was written by the Carrie Fisher. Own it, sis. So it's out here in the cold where she meets a very good boy named Puka and debuts her obligatory Princess I Want song. Now, it's not just every Disney movie, it's not just any princess movie, it's any musical. Listen to any musical soundtrack. They all have the I Want song. This I Want song is what landed it an Oscar nom, sung by Liz Calloway. No, that isn't Meg Ryan singing, you silly sailor. So when she gets denied a train ticket to Paris, this very strange old lady tells her to see Dmitri, who's currently hiding out in the old palace with Vlad as they hold auditions to find their Anastasia. Obviously, nobody fits the metaphorical glass slipper. Fur slipper, maybe? I don't know what they wear in Russia. Apparently, this lady was a direct reference to the very real Anna Anderson, the most famous of the Romanov imposters. She was also clinically insane, and not the fierce, messy French girl that we see here. So Anya sneaks into her old home and looks at some artifacts that slowly start to chip away at her anesthesia. Then comes the cute little song that she and her grandma sang at the beginning of the movie, and it ultimately becomes not only the most iconic song from this movie, but the most iconic scene, period.
Let's go! Yeah!
God, I wish I was her. The scene almost makes you forget that Tsar Nicholas II really sucked at his job. And so her fantasy is interrupted by Vlad and Dmitri, who see a striking resemblance between Anya and this girl in this painting. Either way, he smooth talks his way into convincing Anya to come to Paris with him because why wouldn't you? Oh, and Vlad and Puka develop the most wholesome friendship ever. Vlad is the best character, Puka is best boy. This does not slap with Rasputin, who, up until this point, had been convinced that the entire Romanov family had been killed by those green demons he sold his soul for. Meanwhile, he's just been chilling in purgatory and eating bugs and shit, and poor Bartok has to assist with reattaching his body parts. This movie is rated G. Why? Don't lie to us, movie. We all know Rasputin had mad hoes back in the day. Boney M told us so. As you know, villains always get the best songs, this time being sung by Jim Cummings, aka Winnie the Pooh. But there is one thing about this movie that always bothered me, and it happens in this scene. In the Dark of the Night is so cool. An exiled sorcerer is singing a song in purgatory about how he vows to complete his mission of vengeance on the royal family who betrayed him. He ends it by sending those creepy neon green demons to the living world to wreak havoc on humanity. The song also just slaps, period. And the accompanying visual to all of this is bugs. Cartoon bugs. A dancing cartoon bug chorus line, basically. When I hear this song, I think of like skeletons with guitars or something. And the whole family-friendly G rating excuse isn't valid because clearly this movie wasn't afraid to go there with, you know, murdering a royal family, a guy's body parts regularly falling off, neon green demons wreaking havoc, a terrifying nightmare sequence that comes later, and so much more. Come on, guys. You and the royal family did our boy Rasputin getting super dirty here. You could at least replace the bugs with the mad hose he had back in the day. Oh my god, work, bitch. So, our trio is on a train to Paris, which totally gets them there in one piece, and there are no further conflicts for the rest of this film. I actually didn't notice this until I started writing the script for this, but my new favorite moment in this movie is where Vlad is keeping score between Anya and Dmitri's arguments, which are clearly motivated by sexual frustration. If this hasn't been memed yet, someone please make this happen. Also something I didn't notice as a kid, Vlad and Dmitri's panic when they see that all the travel papers are supposed to be in red, making them hide in the baggage car all because of this new government.
Men are such babies.
You couldn't say that line today. Tucker Carlson would call it woke and throw a tantrum. But things go from bad to worse when Rasputin's demons show up and make this train ride exciting. Like, how did we go from this to the Polar Express? God damn, Russians are just built different, dude. Anyway, they manage to escape the train, and Russia's greatest love machine does what I did when I saw the dead Kennedys endorse Mitt Romney on Twitter. At this point, Bartok is questioning why his best friend is this obsessed with an 18-year-old young woman who did literally nothing to him. And now, onto the with cute Disney-esque animals following our main three as they teach Anya how to act princessly. All the while, this is unknowingly making more cracks at her anesthesia.
Your hand receives a kiss.
Oh, what's up? Smooth move, X-Lax. So, Anya leaves the orphanage upon turning 18, right? And Dmitri is supposed to be roughly her age, maybe like a couple years older. And I know this was a different time, but the most unrealistic aspect of this movie is that a straight guy in his early 20s is this smooth. Like a John Cho level of smooth. I refuse to believe that this man exists. Or maybe people from the 1920s are just built different, dude. So they finally board the ship, and Dmitri gives her this, in my humble opinion, very underwhelming dress. But clearly it makes him feel some kind of way. So they dance together, and we finally get to hear Kelsey Grammer sing by himself.
It's 1, 2, 3, and suddenly...
I'm feeling a little dizzy.
Maybe we should stop.
We have stopped.
What? What? Hey, sometimes I like dumb chick shit, okay? Shut up. Anyway, we interrupt this hot moment between two hot cartoon characters to bring you some really creepy shit. Rasputin seizes this opportunity to make Anya sleepwalk her way into the ocean, all while she has this lovely dream where she gets to see her dad again, which is super bittersweet to begin with, but then it transforms into something that haunts me to this day. This movie is rated G. Why? Also, how do either of them survive this? Russians are just built different, dude. Russia's greatest love machine then does what I did when I saw the dead Kennedys endorse fucking Lindsey Graham on Twitter. I really never will get over that, will I? Either way, they finally make it to Paris, and the Dowager Empress has officially given up on trying to find her granddaughter due to the amount of con artists and imposters she's run into. However, her cousin Sophie remains a bit more optimistic. Turns out, Vlad the Chad's got a sickness for the thickness, and Sophie was the lovely lady he had been adorably swooning over the entire trip. So when they're finally reunited, Anya is literally able to get her foot in the door, but they leave best boy Puka outside. You absolute monsters. So Sophie starts quizzing Anya to see if maybe, just maybe, she is the real Anastasia after all, and Dmitri makes a doozy of a revelation. But first, Sophie offers to take them shopping in Paris, and after Anya does a Disney princess transformation into high fashion, we hear the most Broadway-y song in the whole soundtrack. I mean, no shit, you have Bernadette Peters in your movie.
No more pretend, you'll be gone, that's the end.
Turns out our man Dmitri was the kitchen boy at the beginning who helped them escape through the secret door in the wall, confirming that she is in fact the real deal. Good news for everyone technically, but he stopped thinking about the money a long time ago, and is now heartbroken over the fact that
princesses don't marry kitchen boys.
As hard as Dmitri tries, Marie refuses to meet with Anya, convinced that he's only after reward money and having heard of his life as a con man prior. Anya overhears this, and it goes down about as well as you would expect.
Leave me alone!
So what does our boy Dmitri, who has 50-pound anvils where his balls should be, end up doing? Fucking abducts the Dowager Empress by hijacking her cab and showing her the music box, which seems to finally change her mind. Also, I know it's the 1920s and she still has a driver and all, but this is still a pretty modest ride for royalty. Is this how Abigail Disney gets around? So Marie meets with Anya, and as they reminisce together, her anesthesia finally wears off when they sing Once Upon a December together, confirming that she is the real Anastasia, and now I'm crying. Marie does offer Dmitri the reward money, which he politely declines. Anastasia reveals her new look, which is amazing, but more importantly, look at the drip on these two handsome boys. She thinks her new princess life is what she wants, but Grandma is much older and much wiser, and she knows it would be criminal to pass up the smoothest 20-something this side of Europe. Marie tells Anastasia that he didn't actually take the reward money, and she decides to pursue what really matters. Even the dog agrees, being royalty is boring as shit. Meanwhile, Russia's greatest love machine has been scheming in a fucking clock tower of all places. Girl, come on. A clock tower? You can be less cliche than that. Or maybe you can't be, because now you're cornering Anastasia in a hedge maze. Unbelievable. Anastasia recognizes him now that her anesthesia has worn off, and they have a final confrontation, all while she wears this lovely gown. That's how you know she's princess material. Bartok decides to just straight up stay out of it so that he can at least get his happy ending. We get a Dmitri ex machina to help out, but then he gets fucking launched onto this horse statue. That was the other scariest thing to me as a child. This movie is rated G. Why? Best boy Puka also shows up to help, and Anastasia saves the day and ends the Romanov curse when she crushes the reliquary under her heels, turning the demons against Rasputin, and this movie is still rated G. Why? Well, ultimately, I'm glad that it is, because it means they're not gonna kill off the Nicholas D. Wolfwood of this movie. Thank God. And so, this hot cartoon couple finally elopes, making Grandma proud and living happily ever after in a backdrop that Ratatouille definitely ripped off. And even our boy Bartok gets laid. Seriously, why isn't this my favorite movie? So, with these bangin' show tunes, this beautiful animation, and an honestly way too happy ending for almost everyone involved, it couldn't have been further from the historical truth. So what was Russia's response to the Disneyfication of such an important moment in their history? Actually, pretty positive. There are just certain things you can take creative liberties with, including historical events. I mean, shit, look at anything Tarantino's done in the past 15 years. Just because some of the characters and events that take place in the movie were real, it doesn't make it a historical film, and it doesn't have to be one. Gemini Films, which was Anastasia's Russian distributor, actually stressed the fact to the public that the story was not history and was instead a fairy tale set against the backdrop of real Russian events. Ultimately, most of Russia saw it for what it was and consumed and enjoyed it like everybody else. That's not to say that plenty of Debbie Downers disagreed, most notably the Russian Orthodox Church and a bunch of nerd historians. My personal favorite negative review was from historian Bob Atchison, who said that Anastasia was like making a film where, and I quote, Anne Frank moves to Orlando and opens a crocodile farm with a guy named Mort. If only this narc knew how much money I'd pay to see that. Meanwhile, the Russian Orthodox Church had canonized Tsar Nicholas II and his immediate family, including the Grand Duchess Anastasia, as martyred saints after their deaths. That alone makes this movie offensive to them by default. They saw it as distasteful and exploitative of the Romanov family and Russian history in general. And hey, I get it. I really do. I'm not religious or anything, and I don't believe in sainthood. I don't really get offended by anything either, so I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. Let's see. Like, maybe if there was a movie where Divine and John Waters got together and they executive produced the newest season of Drag Race and then donated all the money to like PETA or the NRA or something. Okay, yeah, I'd be pretty mad. Oh, and Divine would be played by James Corden and John Waters would be played by Matthew McConaughey. Let's just say that instead of this movie, a historically accurate film about the Romanov family was released. Something that would appease those who revere Tsar Nicholas II as a saint, as well as those scowling nerd historians. Here's the Cliff Notes version of what that would look like, and I'm about to do something that I don't do often. I am issuing a trigger warning for mentions of kidnap, murder, and sexual assault. If you don't want to hear a drag queen on the internet talk about that, please skip to the timestamp below. So, I personally don't know the guy, but aside from some Soviet historians, most others came to the conclusion that Tsar Nicholas II was generally a well-meaning person who was also terrible at his job. After all, the only reason he was in that position of power is because he was born into it. There is a justifiable reason as to why people wanted to abolish the monarchy in Russia. He also said some less than favorable things about Jews, but that's a whole other can of worms. On the whole, though, he desired peace over war, and we all know how well that goes. So after the February Revolution in Russia, the first of many more to come, the Romanovs and their servants were placed under house arrest and imprisoned in the Alexander Palace by the provisional government. Despite the constant threat of being surrounded by guards 24/7, they still lived pretty damn comfortably. But when the Bolsheviks came into power in 1917, things got much harsher. The point that the Bolsheviks were trying to make would be that the family would not be allowed to live as royalty. So the family was eventually placed on soldiers' rations, and the sentries would go out of their way to intimidate and offend Nicholas's daughters, one of whom was, you guessed it, the Romanovs were then relocated to a place called the House of Special Purpose, which is one of the most terrifying names for a place ever conceived. They went from being under house arrest to straight up being held hostage, living under constant surveillance in complete isolation in blacked out rooms, threatened with being shot if they even looked out of a window, and their money, jewelry, and other belongings were then confiscated by the Bolsheviks, who then sold them for hard currency for themselves. Lest we forget, the Bolshevik movement is what led to the rise of communism, which leftist, socialist, and anarchist groups tried to revolt against. But those groups were suppressed during the Kronstadt Rebellion, where the Bolsheviks murdered thousands of them. Cannibal Farm. And to think, I got straight C's in history in high school. Look at me now. This goes on for several months, all while the Bolsheviks, led by Yakov Yurovsky, plan how to murder Nicholas and his family with leaving the least amount of evidence as possible. Shit gets really gnarly right here, so if you don't want to hear about it, please skip ahead. This included muffling the execution room in case of screaming, and actually having to instruct the sentries to not sexually assault the women and girls. Not out of any goodness of his heart, obviously. They were told to shoot directly at the heart to avoid a massive quantity of blood and to get it over with as soon as possible. This, however, is not how it went down. So they order the Romanov family into the basement of the House of Special Purpose, where they announce the decision to execute them. And before Nicholas could ask why, after saying saying what twice, a mostly drunken firing squad unloaded all of their bullets into every corner of the room. Worried that they were making too much noise, they instead decided to kill those who remained with gun butts and bayonets. The children, including Anastasia, were the last to go. And so their bodies were loaded into a Fiat truck and driven to a disposal site somewhere in the forest. They were stripped and dumped into a mine shaft, and their faces were smashed in with rifle butts and doused with sulfuric acid in order to disfigure them beyond recognition. Apparently, the pit wasn't deep enough to submerge all the bodies, so they tried collapsing the mine further with hand grenades. They failed at trying to bury the bodies so many times, in so many places, in so many ways, that Yurovsky finally said, fuck it, let's just bury them normally. Now officially ending the trigger warning. Horrifying, yes? The worst thing you've heard and will hear all week, correct? Everything I just described can be way too easily seen in your head, right? Man, what a comeback to YouTube this is. Conclusion reached by the rest of the world and the majority of Russia? Yeah, Tsar Nicholas II sucked. But Jesus fucking Christ, he and the family didn't deserve that. This story is the reason Jesus Christ changed his middle name to fucking. Even the rumor that Anastasia was still alive was depressing. Nearly all the Romanov imposters were either clinically insane or, obviously, just trying to get money. Now, call me a hopeless romantic or an optimist or whatever, but I have a feeling that this is not a version of this story that the public would want to ever see. You could make the argument that those dissenters don't want to see this movie and that a movie shouldn't have been made at all. Does it whitewash history? Kinda? Are people allowed to be offended by something that whitewashes history? Yeah, of course. I think we can imagine that a Disney-like musical with talking animal sidekicks might be kind of a slap in the face to those who want to honor this particular point in history. In fact, the reason I brought it up at all and went into the gory details is because I thought it was important to touch on it. But at the end of the day, the movie is a story to be enjoyed for what it is. At no point does it claim to be inspired by true events, even though every shitty horror movie does that now, and no horror movie could ever top what actually happened to the Romanov family. Final consensus. Fuck off. I love this movie. Also, here's a super recent update on Anastasia's Disney princess status. And by recent, I mean 2022. So this movie first became available on Disney Plus in Once Upon a December 2020, following their acquisition of the artist formerly known as 20th Century Fox. Anyway, it was removed in March of 2022, coincidentally at the very same time that Putin invaded Ukraine. Disney claims that this was purely coincidental and that they had only just transferred it to Stars at the time, but they had also suspended the release of Turning Red in Russia following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Listen, I'm no conspiracy theorist or nothing, but I don't know about you. I don't exactly trust a corporation that has like a vor fetish for every company on the planet. Anastasia's Disney princess status still is unknown, but honestly, girl, you're so above that. Anyway, it is now time for a very long overdue announcement of the winning comment from my last video. Mark Tiger says, "Hey, new Coke with all the flavor of classic Coke, but with even better packaging. Love your stuff and always happy to see more." God, what a relief to know I'm not being compared to that absolute trash called Diet Coke. And you're right, I've got a hell of a package. You too can be featured in my next video. Please leave a comment below and I will pick my favorite one and give you a shout out next time. It feels so good to be back here, and if you'd like to see my clown mug elsewhere, please consider following me on Instagram or TikTok. My handle for both is @QueenCokeFrancis. If you enjoyed this video and haven't done so already, I ask that you please make a long cross-country journey across Europe to reunite a young woman with her grandmother. When you finally meet her, instead instead of introducing her to her granddaughter, kindly unzip your pants and dick slap those like and subscribe buttons as hard as you can. And as always, and forever, until next time,